So some of you may be wondering, wait a minute, you just did this video. Yeah, and I just deleted it because I just realized there were some movies I forgot. And in my defense, it was a very long day at work. I was very tired. And also, my back is pretty much fucked up. So, yeah, I wasn't thinking clearly. But yeah. So here's the revised list for the versus movie, of monster versus movies. Yeah. So, like I said, this is going to go from worst to best. If you've already seen the video, then you probably know, already know how this is going to go down. But I've added some other ones. There were three movies, thanks to, real quick, to my good friend Matt Denian for pointing out, hey, you missed some. And yeah, I did. And I was like, oh, fuck, I knew I was forgetting something. Anyway, so here we go. Once again, take it from the top. Yeah. So, as always, if you think a movie should be higher or lower on the list, that's totally fine. I'm always curious to see where these movies rank for you, but yeah. So let's get started. So, our first movie is at the bottom. We're starting at the bottom tier, and that is Dracula versus Frankenstein. Now, it occurs to me that, like, there were two movies named Dracula versus Frankenstein, and they kind of had similar plots. Both of them are pretty garbage. I would not recommend them. One of them is, sadly, one of Lon Chaney Jr.'s last movies, and it's pretty bad. It's a pretty awful... They're both pretty bad. I wouldn't recommend them. That's all I'm going to say on that. They are both really garbo movies, and I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. Next up on this list, going just a wee bit higher, is Alien vs. Predator Requiem. Marginally better than both of the Dracula vs. Frankenstein movies. AVP Requiem is one of the worst movies I have ever seen in my life. And also, you can't see the fucking thing. It's too dark. Like, I've turned up the brightness multiple times to see if I can watch this movie. No. Yeah, it's cool. The creature effects are really cool when you can see them, but everything's ass. The story is a mess. The characters aren't interesting. The gore is okay, but like... And the Predator Alien does look cool. But this movie sucks. This movie just fucking sucks. Yeah. So, stepping up from that is Sadako versus Kayako. Sadako versus Kayako is the Freddy versus Jason of J-horror. You basically have the two biggest killers of the J-horror franchises from The Grudge and Ringu and put them together in a mashup movie. And what do you get? Well, much like Freddy vs. Jason, that movie is also a incoherent pile of garbage. But it's not as fun. It's really not as fun. Sadako vs. Kayako is literally, I don't think anyone in that production crew, from the directors to the writers to anyone else, watched the fucking movie. I really don't think anyone watched that movie. Because they have no concept of the curses, they have no concept of the characters. They really have nothing to go on in this fucking franchise. They really have nothing. They really don't understand Ringu or The Grudge. It's just they take the bare bones thing of it and mash it together. Either curse is fucked up. And I mean that in the sense of they're not the curses that you know them. Like, you didn't do the research. Like, no one in this, on this production staff did any fucking research. The fight is garbage. Because, yeah, I mean, in fairness, it was going to be hard to have Sadako and Kayako fight, but, like, it's pretty bad, and they don't meet till the last 5 minutes. And that's a problem with a lot of these monster versus movies, is that a lot of them have that problem of... a lot of them have this major problem of the fight isn't until the last minute. But here, it really feels last minute. The only thing saving it is the the really interesting mashup of fusing Sadako and Kayako together, but even then, it's not great. I think you can still find this movie free on YouTube. I think you can still find it over there on YouTube. But I give it, like, one shot just to, like give it one watch for the sake of it, honestly. Next up on our list is excuse me, Alien versus Predator. The production team and the everything else is pretty well done. The idea of having young Yautja on Earth fighting aliens on a temple, yes, it was meant to be more of the Dark Horse books, but budget wouldn't allow it. Also, this movie suffers from PG-13. Even the unrated's not great. The characters are marginally better. You can't go wrong with Lance Henriksen. You really can't. The fight between the aliens and predators are really well done, and it's really nice to see practical effects in an Alien and Predator movie. However, having said that, again, the PG-13 is kind of a big problem. Plus, this does not do any dues for either franchise. It's a pretty skippable movie, but it is way more watchable than Alien vs. Predator Requiem. But then again, watching an elephant get butt-fucked by a rhinoceros is more interesting than watching AVP Requiem. And that's all I have to say on that. Anyway, moving right along to our next movie. And this is where we get to... Now we're getting into some good stuff, or rather okay stuff, I should say. That's the better... Well, yeah. Starting off with that list, we have Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, let's get this out of the way. Frankenstein meets the Wolfman is arguably the most important crossover movie of all time, because it was literally the thing that started it all. Without this movie, without Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, we would not have the Universal Monsters Cinematic Universe or the Abbott and Costello crossovers. We would not have Freddy vs. Jason. We would not have King Kong vs. Godzilla. Any verses you think of in a movie, any verses you could think of in any point, they wouldn't happen without this movie. Now, it's historically a cinematic part of history because of that alone. Like, I cannot take that away from it. But having said that, this is a movie I would, this is a pretty boring movie until the end. Now, in fairness, this is more treated as a sequel to The Wolfman, and, you know, having Lon Chaney Jr. back as Larry Talbot and the Wolfman is really cool, and it does try to have some continuity with the Ghost of Frankenstein, but even then they cut that out. So, and also, fun fact, the reason why the Frankenstein monster in here is like walking with his arms out and just going, "Arr!" The thing you always associate Frankenstein's monster with, is because they cut out the important part of why that is. You see, in Ghost of Frankenstein, Igor, Bela Lugosi's character, who Bela Lugosi does play the Frankenstein monster in here, which he was supposed to play originally. It's a whole thing. Well, that's a fucking story for another time. Bela Lugosi, point being, he plays the monster in here, but before he played Igor, this guy who had his neck broke and was trying to possess the body due to a brain transfer of the monster, but his eyes couldn't match the surgery, so he went blind. And that's why originally in that film they were trying to have some carryover with Ghost of Frankenstein, and that's why he's walking around blind. In fact, if you look really closely in this movie, you can see Bela talk as the monster, but they cut it out because they were like, nah, let's not have the monster talk. Let's just make him mindless. The ending fight is pretty good, and it's cinematic history. But for the most part, this movie is a bore to watch. But yeah, so there you go. Following that on our list is Godzilla vs. Mothra. Now we're getting into the good movies. Now we're getting into the really good movies. So Godzilla vs. Mothra. This movie is basically... Godzilla vs. Mothra is, like Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, important because this is the first time Toho monsters crossed over. This was basically the first time we had... this basically set up the Toho Godzilla universe. It was the Batman v Superman of Toho, and it's a great movie. It's one of the best of the Showa era, and arguably one of the best Godzilla movies out of the franchise. It's a great fight sequence. Both monsters get a lot of love. I also really love the Godzilla suit in here, even when he's bumblefucking around in the city. But as it stands, it's a great film and gives us one of the best rivalries in the franchise. Next up, King Kong vs. Godzilla, the first of these Godzilla crossovers. this was yes, the movie can be goofy and weird and funny, but that was more of, you see, Hishiro Honda was trying to make a comedy, yes, but Honda was actually doing a big brain move of having it be pointing and laughing at Japanese capitalism at the time and its consumerism, because he really didn't like where it was going. So that's why it's so over the top in the and that's why the plot is so weird, is because Ishiro Honda is just kind of doing that to Japanese capitalism. Yeah. So there you go. I think it's a fun movie. Yes, the Kong suit looks bad, but there's enough engaging storyline, and I absolutely love the Godzilla suit in that movie. But I love the fight in here. The first fight's kind of ass, but I think that's the point, is to show that Kong's outmatched here. But that fight in Mount Fuji is one of the best Godzilla fights in the entire franchise. Yeah. And speaking of, let's move on to our second movie. The second favorite movie on my list. And that is Godzilla vs. Kong. Yep, we had 3 Godzilla movies in a row. Fuck you, it's my list. So, Godzilla vs. Kong literally took everything that was good about the original film and brought it up to speed here. Like I have said before, this movie is the reason we still have the MonsterVerse movies going, because this movie literally pulled everyone out of the doldrums of the depression of the pandemic and made them want to go back to cinema. This movie is the reason cinema was basically saved. Not Tenet, as much as Christopher Nolan would like to believe. Yeah, Godzilla vs. Kong was a very important movie of 2021, because this movie was supposed to be the last movie of the MonsterVerse, because after how bad Godzilla King of the Monsters did. But this movie basically saved that franchise. So that's why we have Godzilla Kong: The New Empire. It's a fun movie, and it's only the other movie outside of The Dark Knight where people stood up and applauded that I was in a theater watching a Godzilla movie getting stood up and applauded. I didn't even see that for -1. Then again, it was a fat guy with BO and about 3 other nerds, one of which I wanted to punch repeatedly in the face if he didn't shut his fucking mouth. I've got some anger issues, sue me. But that's the thing. A Godzilla movie literally had applause to it. It was pretty fun. Anyway, so Godzilla vs. Kong, number 1, and number 2. Number 1, Freddy vs. Jason. This movie is goddamn ridiculous, and I love it. It's a great R-rated carnage candy romp, and it really feels like a updated version of Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, and has a lot of gore to it. Even though, yes, Ronnie Yen knew fuck all about either franchise, he still put together a pretty decent movie. Yes, the human characters are complete and total cannon fodder, but I think the fun of this story, and this is being Robert Englund's final movie as Freddy, is kind of a neat it's a nice swan song to that before everything got rebooted and all of that shit that ensued. So it's a nice swan song for the slasher genre of the 80s, in my opinion, and it was a great movie. I think it was a great movie. Yeah. So yeah, there you go, guys. There's my versus movies. Those are my versus movies. I know I didn't probably have every single Monster versus movie on there. God knows I just now remembered that Puppet Master versus Demonic Toys was the thing, and that movie sucks. Just putting that out there. But yeah, so you guys tell me in the comments below, where do these versus movies and other Monster versus movies that I haven't seen rank for you? Just comment below, let me know. Other than that, hope you all enjoyed this. I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time in the Multiverse.